some breaking news right now. In the last hour, we have heard and seen from Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Bishop T.D. Jakes is updating followers for the first time.
All right, are you ready to jump into a story? One with faith, fame, and a bunch of twists and turns. Because today, we're going to unpack the journey of Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Ooh, I love this one.
Yeah, so we watched this YouTube video, and it really breaks down his whole rise, like from just normal beginnings to becoming like a huge global influencer.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's got way more to it than I ever would have guessed.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What I think is really fascinating about it is that his whole life, it's not just about religion, right? I mean, it really reflects how the role of these faith leaders is changing, you know, in a world that's like constantly shifting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's like rewind way back, right, to the 60s, West Virginia.
Yeah.
Picture a young T.D. Jakes having to deal with like the struggles of his dad being sick.
Right.
But even then, you know, he's showing signs of like this calling he has, preaching to his stuffed animals. Can you even imagine that?
Oh, that's a powerful image, right? I mean, that speaks volumes about how he connected to faith, even as a kid.
Yeah.
And think about it, right? His dad's illness and then him eventually passing away. I mean, that must have had a huge impact on how he understands suffering.
Yeah.
And compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, those experiences, they probably shaped his whole approach to ministry in huge ways.
Absolutely. And it seems like those early life lessons like really stayed with him. You know, he leaves high school to help care for his mom when she's sick. That's dedication, right? That's responsibility.
It is.
That's not your average teenager.
No, not at all. It shows his character.
Yeah.
You know? And that he's willing to step up when things are tough. And then, oh my gosh, at just 23.
Wow.
Fueled by this like unwavering belief, right? He goes and starts his first church.
Yeah.
With just 10 members.
Just 10. 10 people.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's starting from nothing.
Well, right. It just shows how much he believed in what he was doing and his ability to inspire people, even just a small group. You know, it's almost like that experience was like his training ground.
Yeah.
Where he really figured out how to be a leader and develop that preaching style that's so him.
Right, right. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
Jakes and like the small group of followers, they take a leap of faith and head to Dallas. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Potter's House just explodes. It's attracting thousands of people.
Wow.
And it becomes this like powerhouse church, one of the biggest and most influential in the whole U.S.
It is amazing how fast the Potter's House grew, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Jakes just has this way of connecting with people, you know? Like on an emotional level, he offers these messages of hope and resilience. And it really resonates with a huge range of people. He's not just preaching, he's building a community.
Totally. And that new sanctuary that they built,
Yeah.
that is a symbol of that influence, if I've ever seen one. It's like a beacon pulling people in, all different kinds of people.
And that's when you start to see him reaching beyond the pulpit. You know, his book, Woman, Thou Art Loosed,
Yeah.
becomes a huge bestseller, and they even made it into a movie.
Right.
It's like that was the beginning of his whole multimedia empire.
Yeah, it's like he goes from books to films and then like TV programs and even his own streaming channel.
Wow.
This guy does not stop. It's like he has this boundless energy and a vision, you know, like he's always pushing forward.
Oh, he's a pro at diversifying, reaching more and more people. He really solidified himself as a cultural force.
Yeah.
It's not just about preaching anymore. It's about building like a whole brand.
A movement.
And then he starts getting all this recognition. Time magazine calls him America's best preacher. He's advising presidents. He leads the morning prayer at Obama's inauguration. It's like he's on this rocket ride to the top. It really shows how faith and power are connected, you know, in our society. He's using his platform to work with these world leaders. It shows how much influence religious figures can have globally.
Yeah.
But, you know, with that level of fame and influence, controversy is never too far behind.
Oh, right. And then all these theological debates pop up, especially about his views on the Trinity. Some people accuse him of pushing this prosperity gospel, you know, where faith is linked to getting rich.
Right.
And that brings a whole lot of criticism.
It's definitely a complicated issue. Some people argue that his teachings put too much emphasis on getting money and stuff. But others say He's just encouraging people to be successful in all areas of life.
Yeah.
It's not so simple.
Right. And then there's his lifestyle, which some people see as super lavish, and they say it contradicts, like, the whole message of humility you usually associate with religious leaders.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it does make you think about, like, the balance between wealth and faith.
Yeah.
Jakes defends how he lives by pointing out how successful he is as a businessman and all the philanthropy he does.
Right.
But it's something people keep talking about. It follows him.
And just when you think you're starting to understand things, the Diddy lawsuit pops up.
Oh, yeah?
This totally random connection puts his reputation on the line.
Right.
And even though he was barely even mentioned in the actual lawsuit, all these rumors start flying around online and things blow up. He totally denies being involved and even takes a lie detector test and opens up his financial records to prove it.
Wow.
I mean, that's extreme.
Yeah.
It shows how far he'll go to defend his image.
Yeah. It's interesting how that all played out publicly, right? I mean, some people didn't believe him, but others saw what he did as proof he was innocent.
Yeah.
It shows how much power perception has and how fast a reputation can be ruined online.
It's a wild ride for sure. And then, in the middle of all this, he collapses while giving a sermon.
Oh my gosh.
It was a shock to everyone, his congregation and beyond. It reminds us that even someone as powerful as Jakes is still human. We all face those unexpected turns in life.
Absolutely. It was dramatic. Millions of people saw it happen. But like we'll see, it really shows how resilient he is. He doesn't let this define him. He uses it to fuel him.
Yeah.
He actually dictates a whole new book from his hospital bed. Talk about turning a bad situation into something good.
That's so Jakes, though. He takes this experience and turns it into a message of hope, right? And recovery. He inspires people who might be going through their own struggles. And when he comes back to preaching, oh man, it's a moment of triumph. It's like he's saying, I'm back and I'm even stronger now.
Totally. His return, I mean, it shows his spirit and his deep connection to his faith. And, you know, we can't forget about Sarita Jakes and all of this. She's been with him this whole time.
Right.
Supporting him, you know, being his strength.
Their partnership is seriously inspiring. They meet in this little church in West Virginia, get married 6 months later, and they've been on this wild ride ever since.
Yeah.
Raising a family in the public eye, I mean, that can't be easy, especially with the pressure of leading a huge church and a global ministry on top of it.
It takes a special kind of bond to handle that level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
And keep your family strong.
Yeah.
Their story really shows how important love is, you know, partnership, shared values.
Okay, and speaking of navigating tricky stuff, we got to talk about Jakes' changing views on LGBTQ plus issues.
Yeah.
It's something that has gotten him both praise and pushback. You know, it reflects this bigger conversation that's happening in a lot of faith communities these days.
For sure. And it's been a gradual change, right? Some of the things he said early in his career sparked controversy.
Yeah.
But lately, he's been saying things that suggest he's more accepting now.
Right.
More willing to, like, challenge those old school viewpoints.
It is interesting to see him trying to balance his long-held beliefs with, like, the way society is changing. A lot of religious leaders are dealing with that same struggle.
Yeah, definitely. It raises all these questions about faith, tradition, and social justice. You know, how do you stay true to what you believe while also being inclusive and understanding?
Yeah.
That's a tough balancing act.
It is, yeah. And then you have this ongoing debate about the prosperity gospel.
Right.
Some people say Jakes' teachings, especially about, like, financial blessings, are too focused on that whole idea.
Critics point to his lifestyle as proof. But his supporters say he's just encouraging folks to go for it, you know, to be successful in every part of life, even their finances. It's complicated.
It is. But Jakes often frames his message around spiritual prosperity being the base for material wealth. Like, it's not just about getting rich, it's about aligning yourself with something bigger than yourself.
That's a smart way to put it, but people can interpret it in different ways, right? I mean, can you really separate spiritual growth from getting rich? That's a question people have been debating for ages. And what Jakes teaches just adds another layer to it.
So we have this really complex figure here, a man of faith who's built this whole empire, a leader who inspires tons of people but also faces a lot of criticism, a preacher whose message changes with the times.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that we're just seeing one side of things through this YouTube video.
Right.
I mean, there are a ton of other voices, other stories that could help us understand T.D. Jakes better.
Totally. And that's kind of the cool thing about doing these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's not about finding all the answers. It's about exploring the complexities, the contradictions, the nuances of someone's life. And in T.D. Jakes' case, his story's definitely not over yet.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what's he going to focus on next? Will he keep changing his views on social issues? Will he address the criticism about his teachings more directly? We'll have to wait and see.
That's what makes it so interesting. T.D. Jakes' life, it really reflects the times we live in, It's like a little example of the challenges and opportunities facing faith leaders in this crazy, fast-changing world. It makes us think critically, question things, and wrestle with these big questions about faith, power, and purpose. So last time we were talking about T.D. Jakes and that crazy health scare he had collapsing right in the middle of a sermon. I mean, millions of people saw that happen. It really makes you think, even someone who seems invincible, like Jakes, is still human, right?
It's true. And it shows that sometimes things just happen. We can't always control them. But you know what I found really interesting?
Yeah.
The video mentioned that the church had just installed a helipad, like a year and a half before that incident.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out to be a total lifesaver. Literally. They were able to get him to the hospital so fast because of it.
That's amazing. And it wasn't just the helipad, right? It was like the whole church had this emergency plan and everyone knew exactly what to do. There was a cardiologist right there in the front row who rushed to help. Security cleared the whole sanctuary. Someone grabbed the defibrillator. I mean, it's incredible how everyone just jumped into action.
It really is. It makes you realize how important it is to have those systems in place, especially in big gatherings like that. But, even with the best medical care, recovering from something like that is never easy. Jakes had a pretty serious surgery and a long recovery ahead of him.
But he doesn't let it get him down, right? This is where you really see his resilience. Instead of just focusing on what happened, he uses that time to work on a new book. He dictates the whole thing from his hospital bed. That's pretty amazing.
That is so T.D. Jakes. He takes this experience, something that could have broken him, and turns it into this message of hope and overcoming challenges. I mean, he really inspires people who might be going through their own struggles.
Absolutely. And then when he finally comes back to preach, it's like this victory lap, It's like he's saying, I'm back and I'm not going anywhere.
It's powerful. His return, really speaks to his strength. Not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And we got to give credit to Sarita Jakes, too. She's been right there with him this whole time.
Yeah, their partnership is incredible. They met at this tiny church in West Virginia, got married 6 months later, and they've been through it all together. Raising a family while in the public eye can't be easy, especially when you add in the pressure of leading a megachurch and building a global ministry.
You're right. It takes a really strong bond to handle all of that.
Yeah.
To deal with that level of scrutiny and still keep your family close. They've done an amazing job.
For sure. And, speaking of navigating complex issues, we have to talk about Jakes' views on LGBTQ plus issues. This has been a topic that's brought him both praise and criticism, right? Yeah. And it really reflects a much bigger conversation happening in a lot of different faith communities these days.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch how his views have changed over time. Some of the things he said earlier in his career were pretty controversial, but lately he seems to be moving towards more acceptance. Like, he's even challenging some of those traditional beliefs.
Right. It's got to be hard to balance those deeply held beliefs with how quickly society is changing. A lot of religious leaders are struggling with that same thing.
For sure. It brings up a lot of important questions about how faith, tradition, and social justice all intersect. How do you stay true to your values while also being open to different perspectives? It's tricky.
Yeah, there's no easy answer. And then there's this whole debate about the prosperity gospel that keeps coming up.
Right.
Some people say Jakes leans too heavily into that, especially when he talks about financial blessings. They say it's all about getting rich.
And his critics use his lifestyle as proof. But then you have his supporters who say, no, he's just motivating people to be successful in all areas of life, including financially. It's a very nuanced conversation.
I think what's interesting is how Jakes frames it. He often talks about spiritual prosperity being the foundation for material wealth. Like, it's not just about accumulating money, it's about connecting with a higher purpose and letting that guide you.
That's a smart way to look at it, but there's definitely room for different interpretations, right?
Yeah.
Can you really separate spiritual growth from material success? It's a question people have been debating for centuries, and Jakes' teachings just add another layer to the conversation.
So what do we have here? We have this incredibly complex figure, a man of faith who's built an empire, a leader who inspires people but also faces a ton of criticism, a preacher whose message seems to evolve as the world changes around him. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And, we're only getting one perspective through this YouTube video.
Right.
There's so many other voices out there, other stories that could give us a more complete picture of T.D. Jakes, his life and his impact.
That's what I love about these deep dives. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about acknowledging that there's more to the story than what we see on the surface. It's about being open to different perspectives. And in the case of T.D. Jakes, his story definitely isn't over yet.
Not at all. I mean, what's next for him? Will he become even more vocal about social justice issues, even if it means losing some followers? Will he address the criticism about his teachings head on? I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
It's what makes him so fascinating, right? His life reflects the times we live in. It shows us the challenges and opportunities that faith leaders face in a world that's changing faster than ever. It makes us think critically, question what we believe, and try to wrap our heads around these big questions about faith, power, and what it all means. So we've gone through, all the highs and lows of T.D. Jakes' life, haven't we? From those early days when he was preaching to just a handful of people to, building this global platform that reaches millions.
It's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
It really has. I mean, we've seen his charisma, how good he is at business, his ability to connect with people from all different backgrounds. But we've also seen the controversies, the criticisms, those questions that just keep coming up about, his teachings and his lifestyle.
Yeah, it's almost like he embodies this tension, right? Between
Yes.
tradition and change, between faith and wealth, between humility and ambition. It's a lot for one person to deal with.
It really is. And it makes you think, what keeps him going? What motivates him to just keep pushing forward, even with all the challenges and all the people watching his every move? Is it this deep need to help people or a need to build something that lasts, something that goes beyond his own life? Or maybe it's a little bit of both.
Maybe. It's interesting, though, how this YouTube video really focuses on those recent controversies, especially the Diddy lawsuit and all the rumors that came after it. It's like they're trying to show a man trying to protect his image in this world where, information spreads so quickly.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It makes you think about how fame can be both a blessing and a curse these days. On the one hand, you have this huge reach. You can connect with millions of people instantly. But on the other hand, you're always under scrutiny, People are constantly watching you. And it's so easy for rumors and accusations to spread like wildfire. It's scary, actually.
It is. And then
Yeah.
you have that moment when he collapses in the middle of his sermon.
Yeah.
Just stops you in your tracks, Makes you realize that life is fragile, even for someone who seems larger than life.
Totally. But it also shows how tough he is, how resilient. He takes that health scare and turns it into a teaching moment, a chance to connect with people on a deeper level, and then he comes back even stronger. It's inspiring.
It really is. It's like he refuses to be defined by his struggles. And we can't forget about Sarita Jakes either. She's been such a rock for him through all of this. I think their partnership is a huge part of his success. They've built this amazing life together, raising a family, leading this ministry, dealing with all the complexities of fame and fortune.
It makes you realize that having that strong foundation, that supportive partner, is so important when you're facing the kind of pressure T.D. Jakes is under. It's got to be a huge source of strength for him.
Absolutely. And then there's this question of legacy, right? How will people remember him? Will he be seen as a trailblazer, someone who broke down barriers and built connections between faith and culture? Or will he be seen as this controversial figure, someone who got rich and powerful while preaching about humility? Or maybe it'll be a little bit of both.
I think that's the question we're left with after this deep dive. T.D. Jakes is full of contradictions. He's a leader who inspires people, but he also provokes them. He makes them think. And his story isn't over yet. It'll be interesting to see what he does next.
I know, right? Will he speak out even more about social justice, even if it means upsetting some of his followers? Will he directly respond to those criticisms about the prosperity gospel? We just have to wait and see what happens.
But one thing's for sure. He's had a huge impact on the world. He's changed the way we think about what it means to be a faith leader in the 21st century. He's created a platform that reaches millions of people, and he's using it to spread messages of hope and resilience and empowerment. And he's done all of this while, navigating fame and fortune and this constantly changing world of faith. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It really is. He's a complicated figure, that's for sure, but you can't deny his influence.
Definitely. So, As you keep following T.D. Jakes' journey, I want you to think about this. What do you think about his message? How do you make sense of those contradictions? And how do you think he'll be remembered? This deep dive has given us a glimpse into the life of a fascinating, complex person, but it's up to each of us to decide what we take away from it. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of T.D. Jakes. It's been a really thought-provoking experience, and we hope you'll keep exploring the many layers of this extraordinary story.